On the evening of January 13th, 2012, a 17-year-old girl named Kara Robinson is driving home from work in Columbia, South Carolina, following the same familiar roads she's taken dozens of times before, thinking about nothing in particular, when she notices a car pulling up close behind her at a red light, closer than it should be, and before she can react, a man gets out, points a gun at her window, and tells her to unlock the door, and in a matter of seconds, her entire life fractures into before and after, because Kara does exactly what she's told, not out of trust, but out of instinct, understanding immediately that hesitation could get her killed, and the man forces her into his car, drives her away from the city, away from lights and traffic, while keeping the gun visible the entire time. And during that drive, Kara makes a decision that will later save her life. She begins paying attention to everything, the turns, the sounds, the smell of the air, the way the road surface changes, knowing that memory may be the only weapon she has. And eventually, the car pulls into a secluded rural property where Kara is taken inside a house that feels empty and unfinished. And once the door closes behind her, the reality of the situation fully sets in, because she understands she has been abducted by someone who planned this, someone calm, methodical, and terrifyingly controlled. And over the next hours, Kara is restrained, threatened, and interrogated. But she refuses to let panic take over completely, because she realizes very quickly that survival will depend on compliance paired with strategy, not resistance. And she listens carefully as the man talks, revealing pieces of himself without realizing it, mentioning his routines, his habits, the fact that he believes he's smarter than the police. And as the night progresses, Kara is forced to endure a series of terrifying moments that confirm she is in real danger, not being held for ransom, not being mistaken for someone else, but chosen deliberately. And yet even in that fear, she continues to observe, noticing objects in the room, a clock on the wall, the sound of nearby traffic at certain times, the way the man leaves the room and locks the door. And when she is finally left alone, she understands that the most dangerous phase is not the abduction itself, but what comes after, because time gives captors confidence, and confidence leads to mistakes. And Kara begins quietly preparing for the moment when one of those mistakes might give her an opening, knowing that it may be the only one she ever gets. As the night stretches on inside the house, Kara forces herself to stay present, even as exhaustion and fear begin to blur her thoughts, because she understands that dissociating completely would make her miss details that could mean the difference between life and death. And while the man moves in and out of the room, alternating between control and distraction, Kara studies the environment as carefully as she can, noting the position of the bed, the distance to the door, the way the lock sounds when it turns, the objects left within reach. And at one point, she notices something that changes everything, a set of handcuffs attached to the bed frame, but not fully secured, and she files that away, knowing that opportunities rarely announce themselves clearly. And hours later, when the man leaves the room again, confident enough to believe she is fully restrained and compliant, Kara tests the cuffs slowly, carefully, until she realizes she can slip one hand free without making noise. And her heart begins pounding so loudly, she's certain it can be heard through the walls. But she doesn't rush, because panic is what gets people caught. And she waits, listening, timing her breathing with the ambient sounds of the house until she's sure she's alone. And then she moves, freeing herself completely, standing for the first time in what feels like forever. And the reality of escape becomes both exhilarating and terrifying, because now every second matters. And Kara knows she has no idea where she is, no phone, no weapon, and no guarantee that the man won't return at any moment. And yet staying is no longer an option. So she opens the door slowly, stepping into a hallway that leads toward the front of the house. And as she moves, she memorizes everything she passes, the layout, the smell of the rooms, the texture of the floor. Because even if she doesn't make it out, these details might matter later. And when she reaches the front door, she doesn't run. She opens it carefully and steps outside into cold night air, forcing herself to walk at first, knowing that sudden movement could draw attention. And only when she's far enough away does she start running, barefoot, disoriented, driven by adrenaline, and the knowledge that if she stops, she may not survive. And eventually, she reaches a nearby road, where she begins knocking on doors, screaming for help, pounding with everything she has left, until finally lights come on and someone opens a door, and in that moment, Kara collapses. Safe for the first time since the red light, where her life was stolen from her. And when police arrive, she does something extraordinary. She doesn't just describe what happened. She gives them directions, distances, landmarks, sensory details, reconstructing the drive to the house with precision. And because she paid attention when it mattered most, officers are able to locate the property quickly, arrest the man responsible, and uncover evidence that links him to other crimes, transforming Kara's escape into the key that unlocks a much larger and darker investigation. And in the aftermath, Kara is faced with a different kind of challenge, learning how to live with what she remembers, how to process fear without letting it define her, and how to reclaim a sense of agency after it was violently taken from her. And over time, she chooses to speak publicly about what happened, not to relive the trauma, but to explain the mindset that helped her survive, the importance of awareness, intuition, and preparation. And while the experience leaves permanent marks, it also reveals the power of presence under pressure, because Kara's survival was not luck. It was the result of conscious decisions made under unimaginable stress, decisions that turned a moment of terror into a chance to escape. And her story stands as a reminder that even in situations designed to remove all control, awareness can become resistance, and resistance can become survival. On the afternoon of August 24th, 2009, a 14-year-old girl named Elizabeth Smart is walking home from her bedroom inside her family's house in Salt Lake City, Utah, when a man she has never seen before stands in the doorway holding a knife. And in that instant, her sense of safety collapses because the man speaks calmly, confidently, threatening to kill her family if she makes a sound. And Elizabeth, half asleep and terrified, does exactly what he says, stepping quietly out of the house while her parents and siblings sleep just feet away, unaware that their daughter is being taken. And within minutes, Elizabeth disappears into the darkness of the night, barefoot, following a stranger through her own neighborhood. And by the time her parents realize she is gone, the trail is already cold. Police swarm the area, roadblocks are set up, search teams comb the city, helicopters scan rooftops and backyards, and Elizabeth's face quickly becomes known across the country, while her family is thrown into a nightmare defined by unanswered questions, fear, and the crushing uncertainty of not knowing whether their child is alive. And the man who took her, Brian David Mitchell, does not hide far away in some remote wilderness the way people imagine, because instead he keeps Elizabeth moving constantly, walking her through public spaces, bus stations, city streets, dressed in disguises, presenting her as his wife or companion, exploiting the fact that most people don't want to interfere in situations that feel uncomfortable, but not overtly criminal. And Elizabeth is forced to survive through compliance, because Mitchell uses psychological control as much as physical threat, isolating her, renaming her, convincing her that escape will only lead to more violence, while law enforcement faces enormous pressure, chasing leads that go nowhere, dealing with false sightings, hoaxes, and the overwhelming volume of information that floods in when a case becomes national news. And Elizabeth's family refuses to give up, appearing on television, working with investigators, keeping her image visible, hoping that someone, somewhere, will recognize her. And during this time, Elizabeth is repeatedly taken into public view, sometimes within miles of her own home, sometimes near police officers, sometimes near people who have seen her face on missing posters. Yet no one intervenes, and each missed opportunity reinforces the terrifying reality that rescue is not guaranteed by proximity. And as weeks turn into months, Elizabeth learns how to survive mentally, dissociating when necessary, obeying when required, while quietly maintaining a sense of identity that Mitchell tries relentlessly to erase. And this internal resistance becomes her lifeline, because even as she is forced to endure unimaginable conditions, she refuses to believe the story she is being told, refusing to accept that she is forgotten. and this tension between control and defiance defines her captivity, setting the stage for the moment when the illusion finally breaks and the world is forced to confront how close she was to freedom the entire time. As Elizabeth's captivity continues, the pattern becomes disturbingly consistent because Brian David Mitchell understands that the safest way to hide in plain sight is to never stay still long enough for suspicion to settle. And he keeps her constantly on the move, walking through neighborhoods, sleeping in makeshift camps, riding buses, and appearing in public places where people glance but never stop. And every time Elizabeth is taken outside, she becomes acutely aware of how close she is to rescue and how fragile that possibility really is. Because Mitchell controls the narrative at all times, speaking for her, interrupting her, positioning himself between her and anyone who might ask questions, and reinforcing his threats in private, reminding her that any attempt to signal for help would result in violence against her family. And those threats work precisely because they are believable, because Elizabeth knows exactly where her family lives and understands how easily someone like Mitchell could return there. And while police continue searching, the case becomes overwhelmed by false sightings and tips, each one demanding resources, each one leading nowhere. And although Mitchell is questioned by police at one point while walking with Elizabeth in public, his strange but non-violent behavior fails to trigger an arrest, and Elizabeth, conditioned by fear and confusion, does not speak, later describing how silence felt like the only way to keep everyone alive. And as months pass, she is subjected not only to physical captivity, but to intense psychological manipulation, renamed, isolated, deprived of normal communication, and repeatedly told that her previous life is gone. Yet despite this, Elizabeth maintains a quiet internal resistance, holding on to memories, refusing to fully accept the identity imposed on her. And this internal refusal becomes the anchor that keeps her from breaking completely. And the public, meanwhile, grows increasingly frustrated as the case drags on, questioning how a girl could vanish so completely, unaware that she is often just a few steps away from people who know her face. And then, 9 months after the abduction, everything changes during what should have been an ordinary police encounter, when officers notice something off about the group Mitchell is walking with, not because of a tip or a lead, but because of a sense that the situation doesn't fit. And this time, instead of letting it pass, they stop and question him more thoroughly. And Elizabeth is finally separated from Mitchell long enough to be identified. And in that moment, the illusion collapses, because the missing girl everyone has been searching for is standing right there, alive. And within hours, she is reunited with her family, an image that will be broadcast across the country as a moment of collective relief. Yet even in that moment of rescue, the story does not simply end, because freedom does not undo trauma, and Elizabeth must begin the long process of rebuilding her life, while Mitchell is arrested and charged, and the public is forced to confront how close she was to safety for months without anyone realizing it. And as the legal system moves forward and Mitchell is eventually convicted, the case becomes a powerful example of how predators exploit social hesitation, and how survival sometimes depends not on dramatic escapes, but on endurance, awareness, and the will to hold on to one's identity under relentless pressure.